Ok, prova. Okay, guys, we're good to start. Thanks so much for coming to this very boring financial journalism session. So I'll try and make it as interactive and as fun and human as possible. Um, so that's the title of the session, a story. Why? Because that's the story of how a story was covered by the Wall Street Journal in the last couple of years, and how I got dragged into doing that. Please stop me. I'm here alone and I'm supposed to be talking for an hour, which is kind of a bit dull. So stop me anytime for questions, and if you've got any specific angles that you want to cover about it. So first of all, a bit of homework, the W's. What this story is about. The story I've been covering is about market manipulation in the foreign exchange industry. To bring it to the basic, every day you buy and sell currencies. All of a sudden, in 2013, regulators around the world started to investigate whether there was some manipulation or criminal activity behind the setting of the exchange rate. We'll get into the detail later. Why we care? We care because, first of all, it's a story about people rather than markets, so it's a bit more fun. And second, because it's just one of the several examples that of how things work behind the scenes in a big financial newspaper. So it's a good example. We can use that as a proxy for a number of other stories. Who's telling it? That's me. So my name is Chiara. I'm Italian. I'm supposed to be speaking English, which is making things harder for me, but easier for who is watching. Hi, streaming. Cheers. I've been working for the Wall Street Journal for a couple of years in London. So, see, I kind of got some accessories to make it just to fill the space. So just to give you the idea, that's me. I sit within the markets team in London, which is like 4 people. Above me, there is the markets team in the whole European region, so a bunch of people. Above me is the finance team in my region, so a lot of people. And above me is the markets and finance people in the whole world, which is here. And overall is about 3,000 reporters in the world. So that's me, and that's the Wall Street Journal, just to give you the perspective of things. Right, where's the chocolate? I brought some chocolate for you guys just because you're coming to my presentation rather than going to the Facebook one. And then I just realized that they're giving away the same chocolate everywhere in this place, but pass this along if you want. Anyway, so not very original, sorry. Okay, that's the beginning of the story. So it was October 2013, and I sit within the markets team, but my specialization is currencies, just because that's my background and that was the available role at the time when I applied for a job. So that's the job they offer, and I said, yes, sure, fine, I'll cover currencies. And then all of a sudden, I can see like some signs of stress in the face of my editors, and they start bouncing around, and they say, oh my God, there is a criminal investigation, or actually an investigation open into FX markets, and a blog somewhere in Germany, possibly in the German countryside, and that's the blog, is writing that UBS, read super big Swiss bank, is firing 2 people, 2 senior traders, because they have manipulated the market. So that's a big news for a newspaper. So a lot of jumping around, a lot of stress, a lot of calling. And here is what we wrote about the story. So that's not the first story that we wrote about the currency trading probe, but that's one that came like a couple of weeks later when things got a bit clearer. So try and imagine a tiny blog is breaking a massive story. What's the first thing that you do? So we were writing about the euro exchange rate that day. We were writing about market moves. All of a sudden, we need to verify that this is actually true, that this is actually real. So the two guys that have been mentioned in the article that has been picked up by a number of news agencies like Bloomberg, like the Financial Times, like Reuters, is actually true. So the first thing that you do when you have a battle, you divide up and conquer, right? So we are a bunch of 4 reporters, as I said. Each one of them is calling a different bank, is calling a different regulator, is trying to reach this guy, the author of the blog, to verify that this is actually happening. That was actually true. So a number of authorities, in particular the one in the UK and in particular the one in Switzerland, were actually investigating whether traders at top banks were manipulating the market. Now, I just want to point out a couple of things here. So the blog is a very flexible structure, right? So I actually was lucky enough to talk to the guy that day, the author. He just didn't realize, it's like a pop singer that gets famous and gets his hit on the radio all of a sudden, right? He was like, his phone was ringing, he was sitting in his office, or maybe at his place, this Lucas Hassig, and people from all over the world are calling him. So he is very free to write whatever he wants, whether this is true or not. Now, the Wall Street Journal, but the same really applies for any other big organization, is not free to write anything that you wouldn't put your hand on fire for. So you don't see any names of people that were actually being fired or being investigated directly in our stories for a while, because it's very hard from the financial journalist point of view to name someone, to name a person without making sure that what you're writing about the person is true. So that's kind of just to point out what happened. So from a very small blog report in German, so we were all kind of using Google Translator that day and just reaching out to colleagues, asking to translate, we end up on a major story on the Wall Street Journal. But just a small point I want to make here. When I'm talking about the Wall Street Journal, well, it's my paper. I'm very proud of it. They pay my salary, so they wash my brain as well. But the same really applies for all major financial newspapers. So you can read another one. So the same dynamics were going on inside the Financial Times newsroom, the Financial Bloomberg, which has been at the heart of this story for a while as well. So that's the beginning of our story. So it's October 2013. We were markets reporter. We were checking market data, and all of a sudden we start phoning traders that are suspected to have manipulated the market. Okay, what the hell are we talking about? Just like really quickly, why do we care about FX markets? So there are a couple of things. So FX market is the largest market in the world for daily volumes. That's why we care. And it affects everyone, right? I'm sure I've got 3 different currencies in my wallet, but I'm sure it's the same for you, right? So you buy and sell everyday money. Every day, 4.3 trillion of transactions are done. So it's pretty huge. I mean, I don't even know how many zeros a trillion have, so it's huge. So talking about manipulation in the largest market in the world is a big deal. That's why we care. Another reason why we care is because bad people that are doing bad things that affect you. So there is this just general tendency, right, by people just to kind of point to banks, to bankers, saying like they're evil, they're rich, they're trying to ripping us off. So that's something that the reader is actually very interested in. And at the end of the day, we want to write things that care for our readers. Other reason why we care a lot is because the LIBOR investigation, which you might have heard of, was very fresh in everyone's mind. So the LIBOR is a benchmark that is calculated every day on which your mortgage rate is based on. Everything is based on LIBOR. So every day, number of banks, say 10 banks, were sending out their LIBOR rate to a central pool. So say Barclays was saying 1.2, UBS was saying 1.1, and then a central rate was calculated. So what happened a few years ago, basically, it was found out that the bankers were not communicating the right rate. And actually, the paper that broke the story, guess which one was? The Wall Street Journal. So everyone in my newsroom cared a lot about this kind of stories, just because it's one of the defining stories that we as a news organization care about. So they put a lot of kind of news power and force behind it. Right. So just see that as a horse race, right? So you've got different news organizations, you've got Bloomberg, you've got us, you've got the Financial Times. Everyone is trying to compete to move the story forward, to make a difference, to tell something new that has not been out yet. That's like one of the stories that I care about very much. That happened about 10 days after the blog post, and is the first time that in a newspaper someone mentioned what was actually really sexy for the reader. So a chat room in which those bad guys, the traders, were actually discussing how to manipulate the market and how to make money out of FX markets. So those chat rooms had really funny names: the Club, the Bandits, the Dream Team, and the Cartel. So that was the first time that we broke that story. How did that come about? It came about out of a number of conversations, chats, meeting people, meeting traders, phoning up traders and saying, hey, I need to understand what is going on, what is true, what is not. Meeting them in dark alleys, calling them from like other mobile phones, personal phones, just not to alert anyone in the banks. And so you can see that the name that is up there in the byline is Katie Martin. She's my boss. She will be my boss for another couple of weeks. Only, unfortunately, she's leaving us for the Financial Times. And she is the one who got that story. Now, she got the story because she got access to a very senior person that was close to what was going on as part of the investigation, not because she wrote it. So the story that night, everyone was in the office until 11 p.m. The story was written by another editor in London, whose name is not out, has never been out in the FX probe. And he was the person putting it together. But that's Katie's story, because she was the one that got that confirmed. So the first point I'm really trying to make here is that financial journalism, or at least that kind of financial investigative journalism, is not about writing. It's not about fancy prose or anything like that. It's about getting the scoop, getting the story, getting new things out of your sources that have not been written by anyone. Clearly, that was the first story. He eased the wires on October. And then, like, over time, that became a wider topic for the market. So a month later, the Financial Times is writing a long article that I think that appeared on the front page of the paper. Foreign exchange, the big fix, with 3 people writing on that, and the long story which follows, in which the cartel is mentioned, and so on. So just that's really to give you the idea of how you get from hard news, a scoop, a new thing that excites the reader, gets you into the story, into a more kind of commentary editorial piece, of which is meant to draw the attention, of course, yeah.
When you talk of chat room,
Yeah.
I mean, you must have had some kind of deep throat to inform you, or it just by chance know that the person you ring up is telling you the truth. I mean, it's not sort
This
of
is like, basically that question sums up all the points, right? So when such a story starts and breaks, all your time in the office and outside the office is devoted to getting the sources, to getting the deep throat. You want to get that deep throat, the person that is in the middle of the story, right? That knows things that others don't and that wants to talk to you. And I'll talk about sourcing a bit later, but that's what you want, right? So in that case, and so big stories never come easy. If things come too easily, then you should doubt it, right? There is something wrong because there is a lot of effort and it's very competitive. I mean, like, we were like 4 people in our office and Bloomberg had a team of like 10 guys that were all day, they were supposed to talk to people and get scoops on this FX investigation. And the same worked for Reuters, for the Financial Times and so on. So really the idea there was to get out of people that mattered or that knew things, information about the cartel. Now, the key point is also about knowing which questions to ask, right? So the first tip of this cartel thing actually came from one of the people I was talking to, one of my sources. I remember we met, it was a very hot day in London, so we went for Frappuccino, which is something I hate. Like, I cannot stand Frappuccino, honestly, but he was ordering Frappuccino, so I thought I'll order Frappuccino, so I make him at his, right? It feels like we're part of the same club. We both drink Frappuccino. And he told me, look, there is this discussion in the industry about this chat room, this cartel. So when I say chat room, traders, they've got like seven, 8 screens, right? And they talk to other traders into chat rooms. And it's like similar to WhatsApp, really. So you've got 10 different groups, one with your best friend, one with your best friend and the other friend, and so on. So, and you can name the group. So that's the name that they were given to the chat rooms of those friends. The chat rooms were on Bloomberg, but it's really like WhatsApp, no more no less. So we're having this Frappuccino in the middle of a street, in Liverpool Street, and he tells me, look, they're looking at this chat room. Look, it's called the cartel. How bad are those guys? And I was like, oh my God, yeah, this is like too crazy to be possible. Like, honestly, if you're trying to rig a market, do you really call your chat room a cartel? I mean, like, hey, guy, like, let's find another one. So I go back to the office and I talk to my editors. And so we knew that already, right? But it's not verified. You cannot write what you hear drinking cappuccino. You need sources. You need to make sure that this is correct. So the reason why Katie got the story is because she talked to people that were in a position to tell the truth and to support that. They were senior enough and trusted enough for the Wall Street Journal to say, yes, we are standing behind that story and we're writing black on white on the largest newspaper in America that those guys were calling themselves the Bandits Club or the Dream Team. So that's what makes the difference, if that answers your question more or less. So yeah, so that we're still kind of in the first phase, like everyone is desperate to get stories, to understand what is going on. This is failing. Let me try. Yeah, so that's a bit like what I was saying. So it's not about writing, but it's about getting access to the right people. Now, to get access to the right people is a mix, right? As everything in life is having the right phone number. So one of the people that I called immediately after the big story broke in October was actually a contact that I had made at the time of my when I was doing my journalistic internship back in Italy, working with law firms. So totally different setting, totally different scenario, totally different environment, but you should keep your contacts and you never know. And like, of course, you call that guy and you say, hey, how are you? Of course, you remember of me. You remember we spoke last 12 years ago. How are you doing? I wanted to know that very secret thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That scooter ride. So names started circulating about the guys that were in the cartel, in the chat room. And I mean, there is no we are reporters, right? I mean, in my daily job, I spend half of my time in the office and half of my time meeting people, talking to people around. So I took my scooter, I've got the scooter, I'm stereotypical Italian in London. And I just went to one of the addresses that I found online of one of the traders that was mentioned. I mean, what is stopping me from doing that? I want to talk to the people involved. They are my first source, right? So I get to this really nice small flat it was actually a small house in a southern, South London, in very, very nice setting, neighborhood. I knock on the door, asking to talk to that guy. And a nice, like, big black mama opens up and say, hey, this guy is not living here now anymore. He's not been here 10 years. But I tried. I made an effort to reach those people. That Starbucks coffee, yeah, I was talking about the Frappuccino. I hate it. That other coffee, so the other coffee is about finding routines with your sources, finding places that are a bit outside the public eye. Those people, they don't want to talk to journalists. I mean, everyone wants to talk to journalists, but they might end up in trouble if they are seen talking to you, right? So if you want to meet a senior person that you think has got something new to tell you, you don't want to have a meeting in their offices and arranging it through the secretary, right? You want to send them a text on their private mobile phone. You want to kind of get in touch with them in a very subtle way. Maybe you send a private Twitter message. I mean, find other ways. Just don't be obvious. Don't make your traces easily foundable. I'll go to that first, right? So, talking a bit more about sources. Sources are really like relationships, right? It's human interaction, so it doesn't surprise anyone. But so they require your daily attention, right? So once someone, let's say one of the senior traders, started talking to you, he wanted to tell you that you're a journalist, you're trusted in the story because you understand the market, you start putting story out on that topic, so you become a bit of a point of reference for that story. They want to talk to you, okay? But they also want to feel that you need them. So you need to write to them every day, or not every day, but just feel them loved, make them loved. A good source relationship is based on a two-way communication flow and the occasional fight. So they're telling you stuff, but you are telling them stuff as well. It's not a one-way flow. There is a lot of trust involved with sources, because you know that if a senior guy in a bank is talking to you about his boss or what is going on with the compliance department, he is risking his job. So you want to make a step towards him as well. So it's a two-way communication flow. The occasional fight, I mean, like, come on, I'm trusting you. I'm having a two-way communication flow. I'm making you feel loved because I text you at night. That's what you do. On your private mobile phone, just asking, how was your day? I'm drinking Frappuccino for you. Now, if you don't tell me the story and I read the same story on the Financial Times the day after, I get a bit annoyed, right? So in a good source relationship, you actually have the right to stand up and talk and fight a bit. You might find cheating hard, less than in a real relationship, but sometimes when you have a good source, you start trusting him or her a lot, and you don't question enough what they're telling you, right? So never do that. I mean, each and every bit of information that the source is telling you needs to be verified in another way. Never take what you've been told as granted. You find them, they find you. Over the last months, it has happened quite a few times that deepthroat@gmail.com writes to me, and And that's great if Deep Throat is working at Barclays and is a very senior guy. It's not if it's a random guy that has lost his job and doesn't know what to do during the day, so he wants to text a journalist, right? So it's really down to your judgment to understand whether someone knows what they're talking about and what not. And trust me, I mean, like, after a year that you've been writing about those guys and what they've been doing and the market and the structure of the market, you're in a very good position to understand quite easily if they know what they're talking about or not. You find them right away. I mean, my strategy, but I think it works, and I've been having advice from more senior colleagues than I on that. I mean, there's nothing that is stopping you just to writing to the ECB president, Mario Draghi, and say, hey, guy, sorry, not guy, well, hey, Mario, how are you? I need to verify this information. Can you reply? What do you think? Sometimes they reply. I mean, like, really senior and cool people have replied to me asking me not to be named, and yeah, I mean, it works. Relationships can fail, sources can fail, things get cold. You fight, they're upset with you, you do talk for a few months, they go to your competitor. It happens. And sometimes you manage to kind of, as in failed relationships, to kind of like build things back. Sometimes you don't, and it's part of the job. So never rely on a single source. Just get as many as possible. Yeah, LinkedIn is your Tinder. So the web is making our life very easy in getting access to people, right? LinkedIn is honestly a jewel. Is manna from heaven for a journalist. Like, get a premium account and you can write to anyone and everyone in the world, and you can see how they're related, and you can see who has searched for whom. I mean, sometimes, like, I honestly spend like 3 or 4 hours on LinkedIn just checking FX traders, and then I realize it's evening and it's time to leave, and I don't want, because I want to keep swiping right or left, right, for FX traders, though. Right, final thing on sources, which I'm not sure applies to relationships as well, but you should keep the sources that you're talking to secret. And there are very strict rules about it. For example, within the Wall Street Journal, I don't write the name of my sources in emails, because emails can be read, can be traced, Google is watching us, and so on. Only your editors know who your sources for each story are. So just treat your sources with a lot of confidentiality, because they can really lose their job if they're found talking to you. So just is a boiling hot potato a source? Questions on that? Okay. Sure.
There's something else you can mention there to be confidential, except for not writing in emails? Is something else?
As in, like, keeping sources confidential? Yeah. I mean, the name of your source is a secret. That's all I can say. Like, so say and so they are a big asset for you, and each source is different, right? So say I'm talking to 10 different people, I've got routines with each of them, right? So source A, I know he likes to chat over text messages, so I text with him, especially not when he's working, so in the evenings or weekends. I just save the number, his phone number, with a different name, because I might lose my phone, right? Say his name is Mark, and say he's Mark John. I mean, I might lose my phone, and someone else can get access to this guy and see all our conversation. Delete the messages from time to time, or save them in another archive. So, for example, the Wall Street Journal has got a rule, which is on notes, which is be consistent. So I am not bound to keeping all my notes together, but I need to make sure that I'm consistent. So if I keep all conversations, I need to keep all of them right, in an archive. So if I'm having conversation with the source on which I'm based my story, I need to keep that. Um, I, I, I don't talk over dinner to my mom about the name of the people I've been meeting or where they work. And especially I don't talk to one of them about the others. I can mention information that they're telling me, but not the names or not where they're working. Yeah, and again, I mean, in the office, like, it's quite typical if I'm working on a story which is like involves some investigation or some of this probe. I mean, I'm not telling my boss who I'm meeting, or I'm not sending her an email saying, "Look, I'm meeting Mark John." I'm just saying, "I've got a meeting. See you later." So it's a very delicate area because there is a lot at stake for those guys. At the same time, it's very important that your sources and you, I mean, you trust each other, right? So you want to know the name and why they know stuff. So it happened on another story, not on this one, but I had one of those emails, deepthroat.com, and it was giving me good stuff. So I started trusting that person, but I needed to know what was his name, where was he working, how can I trust an email account that I don't know where it's coming from, if you know what I mean. So there is like total transparency between us, and then a complete silo in terms of other people around us. Hope that answers a bit. Right, I just wanted to quickly go back to that story, to the other slides that, right, so that's one of the stories that I've been working for a while. So it's not all about Starbucks coffee and fancy conversations in dark alleys. So I'll try and make it short, even if I can talk about this story for ages. But the focus of the probe then centered on guys that were part of committees, of industry committees in London, New York, and Asia. So most of the people involved in these cartel chat rooms in the manipulation were actually part of these industry committees that meet as part of central banks meetings. So try to imagine guys at the Bank of England that are trying to manipulate the market. It's a big deal. So boss comes around and says, Chiara, what do you have on today? Fine, you read all the minutes of all the meetings in the last 10 years of those guys to see whether there was something that they mentioned that was a bit strange. And I was like, okay, fun, thank you. So I go back and I start reading all the minutes. And I actually find that in 2012, just remember that the story broke in 2013 and the investigations were launched in 2013, those guys were actually already those guys, but like members of the central bank, of the Federal Reserve of New York, were actually looking at the issue. So guess what? When they made the press release and went public saying that there was a problem in 2013, they were not telling the whole truth. They knew that there was a problem with benchmark manipulation in 2012. That's a massive story. That's a great story. I'd write it. Everyone is really happy. Other newspapers are also picking that up. It's night, it's evening. Don't forget that most of the decisions for my paper are taken in New York while we're based in London. So sometimes work gets dragged into the evening. And then like a nasty phone call comes around 1 a.m. from the Federal Reserve. And trust me, I mean, like, you can be kind of cold-blooded, but when you get like a call from the Federal Reserve of New York when you're sleeping at 1 a.m., you get a bit kind of nervous. So I missed one of the minutes in which they were actually talking about the same issue. So a correction was needed. That's something that is not easily acceptable at my paper, but at any newspaper. So that's where it comes back into verifying what your source is and what you're writing about. You need to be 100% sure about what you're talking about. Sorry, that was kind of a self failure that I wanted to show. Right, so where is the story going? So we were saying it started from a blog in Germany. No one have ever heard about this cartel chat firm. A year later, actually exactly a year later, the banks end up paying 4.3 billion. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's the largest settlement for a manipulation investigation ever paid by banks, and from that's paid to regulators in the UK, US, and Switzerland. So it's a global big deal. So that's just to show you the progress, right? From a small investigation, we end up kind of monetizing what's at stake, 4.3 billion. Really quickly, I kind of just wanted to kind of point out how we covered the story. So we knew the investigation, we knew the settlement was coming on that day. We knew that a few days before, but you never know exactly the amount and which banks are involved and so on. So the story was pre-written the day before. We had everything kind of like agreed. We knew what was the background because we had been following the story. Now, again, where talking to sources gets very, very helpful. We hear from a source that the announcement is going to go out at 6 a.m. So we need to be ready really early in the morning to put the story out. So we get in the office at 5, we prepare, we make sure that we've got pictures ready, the heads ready, because when you publish a story, immediately you go out with the headlines first, just to make sure it hits the wire and you're the first to report about something. And then there is something wrong with it, because the announcement comes and there is a bank missing. Where is Barclays? There is no Barclays. We were all sure that this was going to be about 6 banks. Only 5 has settled. Now, that's very interesting, because we were 3 reporters, me with David Enrich, he is a genius, and he's the head of the banking team in London, and Katie Martin again. We are the ones that have been following the story for the year. But other reporters then are called in really early in the morning, trying to understand where is Barclays, what is going on. So plan for the big day to come, but make sure that you're ready for something that is unplanned. And in that case, was Barclays not settling. That was the big day for us, for our investigation. Couple of things to say. How do we write the story? So you start at 6 a.m. with a very tiny 3-paragraph story that hits the wire, you just with the numbers, and then during the day you send up, you work on it, you have updates, and you send out 8, 9 different versions, and the latest one gets wrapped up and goes into the newspaper in the evening. So that's the process during the day. Why do you need 3 names working on the same story? I mean, like, you might just say, do you really need 3 people just working on a story that is quite straightforward because things are being announced that day? Well, yes, because I was writing the story, but I was actually, again, on my scooter, just going from an office to the other of the regulators involved, going to the press conferences, trying to get a bit more details that were not in the press release, while David Enrich was the so-called cook. So the guy that is sitting in the office and putting all the bits together from the other reporters, making sure that the story flows. And Katie Martin as well was helping out, just calling people, and so on. So how do you make sure that the coverage is sufficient, that is enough, and is well developed? So you have a main story, and then we have blogs, and you have other kind of coverage like this one. We protect each other was one of the things, one of the messages in the chat rooms. And again, the FX files, plenty of color, of just dirty talk among traders that was pretty well read that day. So yeah, that was the big day. Right. So what happens? So all the eyes are on that FX story, finally. I mean, like, I've been waiting a year, I've been talking to people, and no one even knew what was going on. And then on that day of the settlement day, I've got my mom calling me and saying, hey, I know, you know what? you know, bad guys at the banks, they're paying money for this FX thing. Do you know anything about it? I remember you mentioned last Christmas something related to FX. And I was like, Mom, that's my story. So it gets into the public domain. So that's when you actually want to monetize on the work you've done, writing stories that appeal to the readers a bit more. And that's one of the stories, that's possibly like the story I'm kind of like more thrilled about in my FX probe career. Few days after the settlement, I go for not a Starbucks coffee, was Pret-a-Manger, but never mind. I go to Pret-a-Manger to one of my sources saying, so what's going on? What's the mood after the settlement? I mean, a lot of guys going, a lot of money to be paid. And he says, you know what? One of the guys in the HSBC files, you know what? He actually works at Goldman Sachs now. And I'm like, really? So I'm sure you know, but Goldman Sachs is like sex and blood for reporting, right? It's like everyone wants to read about Goldman Sachs in finance. It's hot topic. So I have a think about it, and I just like, I go back to the office, and he gave me the name, and I thought, you know what? I'll just try and call this guy up and see what he tells me. Maybe he tells me, you're crazy, your source is crap, and so on. So I call this guy and say, hey, are you... And he picks up. Because, I mean, if you go to the switchboard, right? I Google Goldman Sachs. I'm really bad with contacts, which is, honestly, like, don't get any contact advice from me, but I'm really bad with contacts. So I Google Goldman Sachs, go to a switchboard, say I want to talk to Frank Cahill. I call this guy, he picks up and say, hey, yeah, this is Frank. And I was like, hello, I'm hearing that. Do you have any comment? And he says, I have no comment. And he hang up. Next step you do, you go to the press office saying, you official spokesperson for the bank, do you have anything to say about rumors that one of the people you are employing is actually one of the guys that were working at HSBC and were in chat rooms? And the answer is, I'm checking. And the answer remains, I'm checking for 3-4 days. And of course, I'm like emailing them every hour to see if there are news. And after 3 days, I actually find out that they actually sent me a statement, which is possibly your greatest achievement, because like a statement is a statement, right? And the statement says, you can read a bit there, that Frank Hale is not working there anymore. So that's a super big story, because of my phone call, because of my reporting, this guy has been fired, right? I was talking to him 2 days before, and he was on the trading floor. So that's the moment in which I get shaky, and I call my boss, almost in tears, saying, oh my God, what do I do now? So again, it's not about writing, so they help me out. It's like kids in elementary school, they help me out writing the story, and we file it. And so that was a very big story for the Wall Street Journal that day. Okay.
How did you decide to name him?
Good question. We knew the name because I was talking to him, and I had a statement that was saying this person, name and surname, is not working here anymore, with a comment, with an official comment saying the reasons why he's not working here anymore are related to a period before he joined, and we've been cooperating. So it was quite straightforward. There is like a human angle involved, right? You name that person, you make his dirt public. But we are journalists, and we are supposed to be reporting what's true. At the same time, so we were quite confident. At the same time, there is always a tiny, tiny bit of gamble involved in naming people. And it's a hard decision. I mean, like, to be honest, it was tough. Like, before the end of the day, I got 2 threats of being sued by random people that were naming the story, and it's not easy. So I was in the office, and I was so nervous about that story that was going out that I actually went shopping for running shoes because I needed just to get my head on something else. And I was still shaking when I paid. I mean, like, it's, honestly, it's, and again, like, you remember my chart. I mean, like, I'm a tiny, tiny bubble in a big organization, so it was hard to have this pressure, like, knowing that person had lost the job because of your phone call is quite harsh. In another way to answer your question is that sometimes naming or not naming people is not my decision, but it's my editor's decision, which helps. So we share the responsibility, and this is the great thing about working in team, having 3 bylines, working in teams, making sure that all of us has verified with his own sources a story. That really helps. But yeah, it's always a gamble. And yeah, people in those stories are not named easily. Yeah, another thing that I wanted to mention about the Goldman Sachs story, but it works for each story. I mean, once it's out, you don't take it back. So once the story has gone and has hit the wire, you can have corrections, you can have amplifications, you can just change bits, but you don't take it back. It's out. So it's something that you really need to kind of think carefully because you can't take a big story out once it's on the Wall Street Journal. Match me if you can, just really quickly. I mean, like, then stories like these, you have other news organizations that are trying to write the same because it's a big story. So you will see 2 hours later the same story referring to the Wall Street Journal in the FT or in Bloomberg and so on. Sometimes you just don't care because it's just a tiny story. So you make scoops that matter and scoops that no one's really care. Like, we have like publishing stats of how many people read your stories, and sometimes you've been working really hard on a story. Is your life, you put it out, it's a scoop, and you check the day after, and it's like, it has 100 hits. Honestly, I mean, my tweets get more retweets than 100 hits, so. Right, we're getting towards the end, and I'm sure you're quite happy about it as well. So that's a massive story again that has been going on for months. The big settlement was not really the end of it because it kind of drags on. So you should make sure, I mean, readers turn page and they want new stories. The shelf life of a story like that is really short. So you need to kind of move on with your reporting and with your stories. At the same time, there are ripple effects. So that's a story from last week. Again, one of the investigations that are still open with the FCA, which is the authority in the UK that has been driving the efforts on this effects probe, is focusing on one of the traders that were at Citigroup at the time in which the chat room behavior was really popular, and he wanted to launch a hedge fund, and now this investigation has completely frozen his plans. And this is another scoop that we put out a couple of weeks ago. And you see there are still consequences. Things are still warm on that story. There are still things. Again, another like that was also from Friday. Again, those minutes of these meetings are suggesting that regulators are saying we need to keep monitoring what is going on in the market and so on. That went out as a blog. A year ago, it would have been hard news. So just like to put things into perspective, people get bored and we get bored as well. Now, I mean, you might think that I spent my last 18 months writing about effects. Luckily not. I mean, like, let's say that of the overall working time I had last year, say 30% has been on the effects probe and 70% on something else. So this is like my big baby, my story, but at the same time, it is not all about the effects probe. There is more to it. So just an advice, in case you end up kind of chasing a big investigative story, just keep your mind flexible, keep your ways open. Don't completely shut yourself into a story because otherwise people get bored and you will kind of be left alone in writing stories that no one reads. I think that we might be there. Yeah. So anything you want to write or ask, just please write. I'm quite good at replying to random traders at night or to anyone. So any question on this all on processes or on the story or more in general about how is life in our newsroom? Okay, great. Thank you very much.